All right, guys. We got there. Thanks for everybody's playing along on answering an unplanned question. That was not part of the curriculum tonight, but that worked really well. Good job, Jeff. Good job, Jeff. No surprise that technology is even an issue. This week has been a crazy week. As you prepare to teach, it often is very apparent on how Satan attacks just time after time. For those of you who know, my dad has had some medical complications as well, so that's just played into preparation for this. But happy to say I feel like God is still ready to go with this for us tonight to really be focused on friendship. And you're like, well, friendship, like, is that a commandment? Thou shalt be a friend to others? And I would say, well, maybe not in those words, but this is so biblical, because I was like, that's, you're getting together with a guys group and then you're going to teach them about being friends. It's almost like elementary school or something, like playground rules. This is so biblically driven and really makes you assess for yourself. Who are your friends? How are you as a friend? How are you doing as a friend to others? It was challenging for me to walk through those things, knowing a lot of guys, being a brother to many in many ways and different roles of responsibility. But it was a good exercise. So I pray that it is for you too. We're gonna skip this because Jeff kind of took care of it with a prep question on getting together and defining friendship. I'm just gonna jump straight to what we're talking about when we say friend. So I'm gonna start with the definition. I always like to do that, kind of level set. A person whom one knows and with whom one has a bond of mutual affection, typically exclusive of sexual or family relations. So praise God, we're not talking about sexual relations tonight. We're not talking about family relations tonight. We are truly talking about that bond between two males, because we're talking about male friendship tonight, that bond of friendship that draws us together and helps us do life together. So that is the definition. Friendship is a state of mutual trust and support between two or more people. So you might have a best friend, you might have several close friends that kind of fit this mold. I know that there are many guys who can't really look at this word and this definition and assign it to somebody in their lives by name. I mean, you might be sitting in here tonight and be like, man, my life is void of what you're talking about. Well, the good news is we're talking about how to help in that situation, both as somebody who might not have that in their lives, a friend in their lives, as well as for us who are blessed to have friends in our lives, keeping our eyes open to others who would benefit from having a friend in their life. So this is the definition that we're starting from today. I peppered in some quotes that I found as I was doing some looking into definitions and whatnot. Some of these hopefully bring a smile to you, but we are best friends. Always remember that if you fall, I will pick you up, but only after I finish laughing. I mean, that's a great definition to kind of start with. It's somebody that would appreciate that you're laughing at them, with them, and then you help them back up as well. So when we look into the Bible, what we see is 1 Samuel 18 is a great example of friendships. You're talking about David and Jonathan. I love this picture because I looked up David and Jonathan, and there's like all these kind of masculine pictures, and I was like, man, this just looks like some of us in here, right? This is a better representation than the biblical, where they tried to replicate what David and Jonathan might look like. If you're not familiar with David and Jonathan, so David defeated Goliath, pleased Jonathan's father, King Saul. Jonathan would have every reason to be jealous of David's successes, the way David was looked at. Jonathan's father then wanted to eventually, because of the glory that David was getting, Jonathan's father, King Saul, wanted to kill David. And Jonathan was really put to the test of, who am I loyal to? And the friendship that he had with David really proved to be a deep friendship, one that protected his life, one that encouraged him, one that prayed for him. And so when we look at friendship, there's going to be many references to David and Jonathan. So I just wanted to start off kind of reviewing that this is a great example. And if you want to go back and read 1 Samuel chapter 18, you'll see all the places where we highlight tonight. But if you just say friend, this often comes to many people's minds. If I say, how many friends do you have? You might think about your Facebook circle. I was told when I was talking about this with my wife and daughter that this is no longer applicable because Facebook is my generation and our daughter's generation is not Facebook. So it's more about how many people are following you versus how many people you are friends with. So generically speaking, I'm going to say social media, the impact on what social media has had to the definition of friendship has really twisted friendship and what it means. And I say that because you can, and I've learned this over time, you can unfriend somebody on Facebook without even sending any notification to them that you are unfriending them. Like you can just quietly do that, and all of a sudden they look to see what the status is between the two of you, and you're no longer a friend. You never told them, no breakup, no emotions, just gone. You're no longer friends with them. Well, that in itself says that that wasn't a true friendship to start with. You can also, really cool trick, mute their story, meaning that they no longer come up in your feed. So if they're posting things, you're no longer seeing them, but you're still friends with them. That allows you to keep that connection to them without hurting their feelings by unfriending them, but you never even have to listen to them anymore. What a cool feature is that, right? You can mute them, you can unmute them later, but when we say friends, it's just interesting that Facebook used that term as a connection between two people that's really a digital and social connection. And there is some good use of Facebook in keeping connections that you might not otherwise keep, but it's interesting when you look at a Facebook friend compared to a true friendship. So let's look at some similar words. That's kind of small in the back, I'm sure. Friendship, so it's a close relationship, a mutual attachment, an alliance, I love that word, an alliance with someone, an association, a bond, a camaraderie, that's a cool brotherhood term, camaraderie, fellowship, rapport, understanding, harmony, unity. So kind of keep all of these words in mind as we talk about what friendship is, because these also help us to define and look at friendship through the lens of what we're talking about tonight. So when we talk about friendship, I think we also have to acknowledge a couple things about the culture, the society that we live within, because we've created it for ourselves. And when we've created it, we've really created some barriers to friendship. Today's homes and our lifestyles reflect that lifestyle of individualism, of isolation, of private life. And I say that because let's look at this list of things that are common in a home. Privacy fences really weren't even a thing as early back as like the 70s and 80s, and especially if you go before that. Privacy fences were never built around houses. Number one, the materials didn't justify the cost of putting it up. Neighbors had a lot more interaction between each other. If you needed a fence in a yard, it was probably with like a split rail fence or maybe a chain link fence, but privacy fences came along and it kind of walled you off from interactions with other people. Anytime you limit interactions, you also limit the potential of close relationship or friendship. So just fences are a limiting factor. Garage doors. We literally have the ability to pull our chariot up to our castle, hit a button, the moat gate goes up, you pull in, you hit a button, the moat gate goes down, nobody can interact with you, you get out of your chariot, you go into your castle, and you've had zero interactions. Isolation, private life, very little opportunity to interact with other people. Robo lawnmowers. That's like a newer thing coming out. I know on my way to church, there's a house down here that has one. We laugh because sometimes we see it stuck underneath the parked car in their driveway. But robo lawnmowers mean that you're not out mowing the lawn, doing the lawn work while your neighbors are out doing stuff. You're not interacting with people. Again, all the isolation, privatization. Air conditioners, you say, oh, how is that limiting? It used to be that your window was open. You could hear what was going on in your neighborhood. You could hear the kids passing by, the neighbors walking by, the conversation of the neighbors walking by. You don't hear that now. Small living and dining rooms, but big bedrooms. That like that bedroom is that sanctuary that you go to, and you're even isolating yourself from the rest of your family at that point. But houses are designing themselves that way. Look at new houses. I love Zillow. Like, look at the pictures of the new houses. Huge bathrooms, bedrooms, their own bathroom, a kingdom in itself right there in your own house to isolate and privatize everything. No front porches, not sitting out on the front porch talking to people going by anymore. All these things, and we're like, well, when we put them there because we wanted some peace and quiet. But it's also been a limiting factor to friendship and community. Our society, the barriers that are there are more digital connections than personal connections. The lack of civility between people, how do we treat each other, the dividedness. If you're not for me, you're against me. That's a mentality that we live these days. The self-sufficiency, you can pretty much buy everything that you need to survive on your own without ever having to borrow, lend, or involve yourself with other people. And then just the busyness. I mean, our schedules don't allow time to sit down for a cup of coffee. I'll even say it here in the church, sit down for a beer. Like, we don't give ourselves time to do that. We just rush to the next activity. Even after church, like hitting the door, running for the next activity. Like, I love it when I see that there's still 100 people 10 or 15 minutes after church that are hanging out and talking. That time that's there is a beautiful time of being able to connect with people. So we lack roots, we lack some continuity and community, and we do because there's a lot of jumping around now. We jump between houses, which means we jump between neighborhoods and communities. We jump between churches. If you don't like it, you go right down the street and find another one. We live in a disposable society. If you don't like it, throw it away, get something new. And that is a cultural shift from what the past has had. So these, again, I'm talking about barriers. That's great news, right? Like, these are all the bad news of what we live in and how that affects having friends. But it's true. So we have to learn how to address these very intentionally. Men's friendships typically revolve around activity, while women's revolve around sharing. Do you see that in your life? You can probably say, like, when's the last time I got together with a guy just to talk? I mean, it's probably not the case. You probably got together to work on a project. Now, I'm not saying you didn't talk during the project, but that was the secondary, if any, accomplishment of getting together. It was probably to watch a game, talk about the game, do an activity, like work on something, repair something, fix something, a project, but very rarely to just sit around and share feelings, for sure. So men don't reveal their feelings or weaknesses as readily as women do. And that in itself, again, is a barrier. You wonder why women create such a close and fast friendship. I mean, as soon as you start opening up about emotions or feelings or what they're going through, you're going to have that bond. And I'm not saying that we should act like women, because this is ManUp. We're saying we should act like men. But I think we can take some lessons of, like, well, how did they create friendship? And that was through vulnerability. And we do need to practice that vulnerability. Love this one. Finding friends with the same mental disorder, priceless. Sometimes that's what connects us together, is just, finding those guys who get you and all the tics that you might have, but it's priceless when you find somebody who relates. Total myth. Real men are loners. You look at the picture, I look at this picture, I'm like, man, that dude looks cool. Like, I like to kind of walk down the dirt road with a guitar pack over my shoulder and be by myself. That's pretty rad. It looks hot, he says. But real men are not loners. That is truly a myth. A man should be comfortable by himself. I would argue that. I actually love the exercise of intentionally being by yourself. But I know that if you stay by yourself, that is also not a good place to be. If you ever watch shows like Alone, which is a survival show, most of the contestants that tap out of Alone do not tap out because of the physical demand of survival. Food, shelter, water. They can accomplish those skills. They tap out because they've been isolated for so long that they can no longer take being alone. It's the number one reason why people tap out. Number two is because they took a hatchet and accidentally chopped off their finger or something that need medical care. But truly, being alone, it's just you can only do it for so long, and it has very negative consequences to that. Even if we look at Genesis 2:18, it says, it is not good for man to be alone. And you're like, well, that's talking about woman. That's talking about getting married and the helpmate of a woman. And at first I would have been all about that because I was like, yep, that's a great marriage verse right there. But what I would say is beyond the marriage verse, why did he bring Eve along? Not just to be a helpmate, but to procreate. What is the outcome of procreation? More people. When you have more people, relationships form. Within those relationships, some are closer, some are not as close. But it gives the opportunity for man to not be alone, not only just with his wife, but in fellowship with other people. So I think that verse is much greater than just Eve. That verse also lends itself to procreation and sharing life together. Then we have Christ as our example. So we used David and Jonathan. I love that Jesus Christ took a selfie in this picture. Don't know how he did it, but he is a miraculous dude. But when I looked at it, I was like, that's a pretty fun picture. When I think of Jesus and the disciples, like I picture them hanging out. I mean, this was a close group of brothers. These guys, did some ministry battles together. They walked across, open areas for days to get to another town. They shared meals together. They slept on the ground together. I mean, they prayed together. They did stuff together. So while this picture, obviously was not taken from Jesus' Facebook page, this picture represents what Jesus and his brother, you just got it, didn't you? Like, Jesus didn't have a Facebook page. I know. He's your friend. But hanging out with his disciples, hanging out with the 12, and then within that 12 having an even closer group of 3, that's a picture of friendship right there. How he did life together with them. That is truly friendship. Now, I do need to address this because some of you might even be thinking, especially married men, and you've got a wife who's in a great relationship with you. You're like, well, my wife is my best friend. And I would say, cop out. Like that is the least true statement that should ever be. Your wife should be very, very close to you. I'm saying that she should be a friend and a spouse to you. But your wife will never take the place of another male friend who has a same-sex understanding of you. Try explaining to your wife why you feel the way you feel about any circumstance versus trying to explain that to another guy. I guarantee you that the guy is going to relate to that, especially when you talk about unique characteristics of a guy. You start talking about like needs for intimacy. The guy's going to be like, yep, I'm right there with you. I understand it. Your wife's going to be scratching her head going, that's just not the way I'm wired and I don't really get what you're saying. And then I'm just using that as probably the best example where there's many times unique differences. But your wife is not going to have a male perspective that is your perspective on anything. I mean, you might have similar and even same perspectives on some things, but not in the same as male to male perspective on that. So please don't use that as your cop-out as we talk about friends. If I said list your friends and I found your wife's name on there, I'd be like, oh, let's talk. So let's talk about what friendship is built upon. We're going to go through each one of these fairly quickly. Mutuality, love, commitment, loyalty, and encouragement. 5 different things that friendship is built upon. You will see each one of these as an example of David and Jonathan as they live life together. You will see each one of these as in examples of Jesus and his disciples living together. But these are great examples for us to use. So as we go through this list, just keep in mind that this is kind of the measuring stick of how you're doing in friendship. So let's start with mutuality. First of all, that you share the same worldview and approach to life. That first and foremost to us, because Christ and God the Father should be in your life a central part of everything that you do, that if you don't know the same God, you might have a person that's a a really good person and even could be considered a good friend, but you're going to have just a worldview difference that is not going to allow you to align on the most significant things in your life. I worked with a Jehovah's Witness for a long time, great guy. I mean, I really got to be friends with him. He came over to our place, him and his wife, we went over to his place, great guy. What I found was that the difference between us was just so much, and we were both so rooted in our relationships with what he called his God and what I know as my God. We just couldn't continue to be friendships, not because we hated each other over it, but we just didn't have that mutuality understanding of who God was in our life. So I even want that as you think about friends, because many of us have friends outside of the church, and you should, that's great. But when it really comes down to the brother who's going to be there, this is an important perspective to have, because they might be there for you in a time of need, but what advice are they giving you in that time of need? Probably not the same advice that you're hoping for when it comes to God-focused, God-centered advice. That you long for the same things, that you dream the same mutual dreams, and that you yearn for the same experiences of holiness and worship. So that's what I mean when I say mutuality. Love for each other. Again, that's kind of a weird word to throw in here as we talk about friendships and brotherhood, but if you don't have love in that friendship, your friendship will not survive. Love is an honest, unselfish love, and it has an irresistible drawing power. If you display that love, people will want to be your friend because they'll want what you are offering to others in that form of love. Best friends loan out tools knowing that they'll never be seen again. That is love. That's the perfect example of love. Unselfishness. You know when you loan it out, you might not get it back. A commitment to each other. A true friend is one who walks in when the rest of the world walks out. That is a commitment that is priceless for sure. We'll be best friends forever because you already know too much. That is commitment. When the person knows all those dark things and still says, yep, we're friends. When they know the past, and the past might be an ugly past, and still says, I love you, that's commitment. That's somebody who's there when the rest of you, somebody walks out. Now, what I'll say is, when you do an assessment of yourself, are you offering this to other people? Are you offering these levels of mutuality, love, commitment? Loyalty is a step further than commitment. It means that you're faithful, regardless of whether or not those feelings or actions are reciprocated. Again, when we look at culture and society, I can even think back just 2 generations. So my grandpa, he would only buy a General Motors vehicle, a GM vehicle, because he was loyal to that brand. That no longer exists. I mean, even football teams, it's hard to find people who are loyal because you find them that, if they're in the playoffs this year, that's your favorite team, and next year it might be a different. Now we do have some loyal people, but loyalty it's really a lost characteristic. Marriages is another example of people not being loyal. I mean, as a community where loyalty doesn't exist. And it just reflects our society's change on how we value loyalty. Another quote, I'm your best friend and there isn't anything that you can do about it. That's loyalty. So encouragement. I think that this is probably one of the easiest and most practical characteristics of friendship that we can practice. Encouragement. Encouragement can carry somebody a long way. Have you ever gotten a compliment from somebody? How does it make you feel? How long does that carry you? Mark Twain once said that a compliment could carry him 2 months. I mean, as an author, it was just interesting to hear him say that because I'm sure he had a lot of criticisms. But how far will a compliment carry you? But it's not just like those surface level compliments, hey, your sweater looks good. It really digs down into the character of a person. And we have the opportunity to do this with each other, where you can see somebody in action and then compliment them on that. You can offer help to people. You can offer perspective to them. You can encourage them as they walk their journey. You can tell them that you believe in them. I mean, any more, and I'm not saying this because I just said that technology has too easily replaced personal interactions. But I know that if I'm at work and a brother checks in on me or sends me an encouraging note, my workday just got a whole lot better. Like, it can carry me through the rest of the workday if I'm having a tough day. But doing it on my own, no encouragement, that day is probably going to end up being a tough day through the end of the day. Just that word from another brother can truly be what carries you. So as we look at those 5 characteristics that end on encouragement, think of it as you're in a self-assessment. How am I doing as a friend? Also think through it as an assessment of those that you call friends and how they're acting towards you. And I say that because some of us might be in a position where we need to trim what we call friends. Like, we could probably cut out some of those people. I spent a lot of time with somebody that was a friend of mine for many, many years, but we didn't have the commonality of God in our lives. He didn't believe. He was very clear that he didn't believe. It was a point of division between us. We talked about it. Prayed. I shared the gospel with him many times in many different ways. Lived it with him, just trying to show the love to him. And that became a place where eventually I had to make a decision. It was a mutual decision because I think we both felt the same way. He was sick of hearing the gospel. I was sick of talking till I was blue in the face and getting no place. I still pray for him. I know his name. I see him around, see him on Facebook, and I still pray for him. But I don't spend my time there calling him a friend. I love him. I don't want to see him burn in hell. But when I want to go out, I'm going to call somebody who has that mutual understanding, that has that love for me that I can share back with them, that has the commitment, that has the loyalty, that is an encouraging brother. So there might be some people that you need to trim out of your life too. That can be hard. You don't want to be the jerk. You want to do it in some loving way, but think about that as well as you assess friendships this week. But yeah, we still have enough time. We made it through that. Here are your questions. What barriers to friendships relate to your life? And number 2, what could you work on to gain or improve friendships in your life? So just 2 questions. And I really do want you to think through there on technology. Love it.
I know.
Think through it. Friendship is a two-way street. So sometimes people are like, well, nobody's my friend. And I would say, what are you doing to seek out friendship? Are you praying to find friends? And we'll talk about that next week. But really just think through what those barriers are to friendship in your life and what you could do to gain or improve friendships in your life. Sound good, guys? All right, I'll close this in prayer and we'll head out to small groups. God, friendship is a funny word because it's as fickle as a relationship is. But God, we know that friendship is also what allows us to live the way that you want us to live, by showing your love to others, by growing with others. God, you show the perfect example of friendship through your Son, Jesus Christ, and those that he had as human companions. There's many others who had lives that you would say are amazing examples to us. Even David, through the ups and downs of his life, was an amazing example, and his friendship with Jonathan is a great example. But God, we're living today among other guys, some of which need a friend, and Lord, we might be the person who needs to have a friend. So God, let us be sensitive to those around us. Let us evaluate our friendships well. And God, when we connect with a guy or a group of guys, let it be something that is awesome and our lives growing in you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, small group.